All right, Mr. Claxon's algebra students. Going to relate some math to real-world data here. Study some Windchill. Maybe you all will be celebrating. I'd like to thank Kool and the gang, pun intended, for introducing me to this lesson. Here we're looking at Windchill, right? And we're exploring Windchill and the mathematics behind it. This all comes from a chart released by the National Weather Service that you see here, and the formula that they use to calculate wind chill. I'm sure a very smart person came up with this formula. Would love to know how they went about measuring this, and all the great things that come from using mathematics, right? It might even get you a day off school tomorrow. Who knows? So that was the major question: is will there be school? To figure that out, we might make observations about the temperature. So we're going to make some observations here about the temperature and about a function that we can use to model the wind chill, that is, at different wind speeds. So looking at today, whenever you left school, you were looking at mostly cloudy. We had 13 degrees Fahrenheit with a west wind gusting up to 20 miles per hour. And, it felt like -3 degrees Fahrenheit. Boy, it felt cold, I know. Looking at the forecast for tonight, whoa, mostly cloudy with a low around -2 degrees. So that was the focus here. I am focusing this particular video to letter C. That was letter C of our chill out, power of nature, wind, patterns, functions, and algebra. Wind chill index. Say that 3 times real fast. So that's where we're at. We're at letter C. I gave you an example here where we had a constant air temperature of 20 degrees and I let the wind speed be x. Notice how I have an unsimplified version and a simplified version. The unsimplified version is up here, the simplified version outlined in blue. I do show you another example here on how to get an unsimplified version, how to convert that to a simplified version. All you got to do is combine like terms and use some basic math, multiplication, what have you. So why did I let my temperature be -2 degrees Fahrenheit? Because look at the forecast tonight. Mostly cloudy with a low around -2. Now it tells me what the wind chill values are going to be, but that kind of takes the math out of it. So we'll go ahead and ignore that for now, that they're telling us the wind chill values are going to be -18, because we're going to make some calculations here. We're going to plug this into a function, and it's going to be a great time. So I do have my function that I entered, the simplified version and the unsimplified. So this is simplified. You'll see that in Y2 when I show you the function here. If I show you the y equals, the unsimplified version is up here in Y1, simplified down in Y2. I've selected the simplified version. I did confirm first, by the way, that they were both equivalent by going back here and selecting both of these equations. I selected both of them, and then I went to my table. And I verified that they were putting out the same values. So that is something you might want to consider if you are going to try to convert to a simplified version, which is a little more difficult. I have noticed, though, that students make mistakes up here in the equation editor. And when you have the unsimplified version, it just goes on forever, and it's tough to find your mistake. So this is just another ploy by a math teacher for you to simplify your work. Look at Y2. It just looks much cleaner. And all we had to do was some basic math and combine like terms. So how did I get this function? Well, I hope that if you don't understand how I got to this function, you can pause and maybe look at the work that I performed, and maybe you could even try it to see if you're getting the same values. We are going to make observations about this graph. I do want you to graph this by hand. Yes, I know, by hand. if you would have just tried to plug this into the graph and go, you would have gotten a graph that looks like this. Not very helpful to you. This viewing window is not helpful to us because it doesn't really represent the full spectrum of what can happen tonight with the wind chill getting so low. Well, actually, it just doesn't give us a good picture. We can see down here that, well, actually, no, the wind speeds are going to be greater than 10. So what do we have to consider here? We first have to kind of get our bearings. Consider that X represents wind speed and Y represents wind chill. Now that's the temperature, right? It represents the temperature, which is wind chill, in degrees Fahrenheit. So you have to think of that first so you don't get confused. This is not a good viewing window. Why? Because my wind speed only goes from -10 to 10. Well, that doesn't make any sense. We don't have negative wind speeds. Not a good viewing window. Now, you might want to pause it. Ask yourself, why is this not as good of a viewing window? Okay, maybe you paused it, maybe you didn't. But it's not as good of a viewing window because look at our temperature. Our temperature only goes from -10 to 10. We know that school is not going to be canceled if we have a negative, if it feels like -10 out there. We're hard-nosed. We're tougher than that. So as we indicated this morning. All right, so now we have our ideal viewing window. You look here. How did I get these values? How did I understand how to make the viewing window? Well, actually, I had to go to the table first and kind of test different values. So I went to the table. Understand this table didn't really take me far enough. I had to. I went ahead and generated an automatic table by going to table setup. You set your table. I could show you how to do that. Just hit second window. So I hit second window. I get to this table setup. I want my table to start at 0, and I want to change by 5. I want it to automatically generate that. Again, I would put the independent variable on ask if I wanted to enter in the values. All right, coming back to here, I wanted to go all the way through 50-mile-an-hour winds just because I wanted to get a little crazy. Understand, we're only going to, the data only up to 25 mile an hour is going to be useful to us. So, you know, I could have only went to 25. I wanted to get a little crazy with it and go to 50. So that's what I selected. That's how I generated this window. That's how I selected, hey, I want my X-min to be -35. I had to look, hey, what is the temperature when, you know, for my max wind speed here? Well, for a 50-mile-an-hour wind, and this is if the temperature is -2, we're going to get something around -34 degrees Fahrenheit. I called it -35, made it a day. I could have brought my Y max. I could have brought that down a little bit because I know that I'm going to have temperatures that if it's -2 out, I really should have started this, you know, at -2 or even 0. My Y max should have been 0 there. So I could have changed this to make it even a better viewing window. All right. So what does the graph look like? And let's talk some wind chills here. The graph actually looks like, I'm going to have to go here and click on graph. Hopefully it doesn't freeze again. That's why I had to pause it. Looking at this graph, I can see that it's nonlinear. And what I wanted you to get, what we're getting to here is rate of change between different parts of this graph. You can't hit the trace button. You know, let's say, you know, going back to the forecast, we know that it could be gusting up to 25 mile an hour. But they said the wind, I think it said would start at 11 miles per hour. So we're going to go ahead and enter in 11, see what our output is here. What is our output? It is -19. So boy, if that is the case, you know, if we are experiencing something that feels like -19, boy, we look at our wind chill chart here, 19 puts us into that, you know, you're getting frostbite times, and that's for adults, mind you. Adults are experiencing frostbite times, you know, 30 minutes. You know, we don't want anyone to get injured, so they probably will cancel school if it's that cold. But it's all based on a forecast, and really it depends on where you get your forecast from. I get my forecast from weather.gov. You can click a nice little clickable map here and click to find your forecast. So again, really it all depends on what actually happens and how cold it's going to be on Friday. You see wind chill values here as low as -18. You know, it's 50-50, folks. It really depends on, you know, what's going to be happening in real time. And maybe it might get colder overnight. You never know. So I hope you found this video to be helpful. I hope you will be able to make your own graph. And yeah, let's go ahead and let's hope to be here tomorrow so we can learn some more about wind chill. What do you say?